Hi and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar CMMC 201. We're happy to have you with us as we take a step-by-step look at conducting your self-assessment with confidence. My name is Jennifer Arena, and I'm the marketing manager at the AME Group. I'll be your host for the session today. Before we dive in, I have a few quick housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to everybody who registered, so you'll be able to revisit the content and share it with your team. We encourage you to use the Q&A panel throughout the session. We'll be monitoring your questions and addressing them throughout the webinar. Jay Sundberg is our security specialist here at the AME Group. Jay has helped multiple organizations prepare and achieve security compliance. Welcome, Jay, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Jennifer. Looking forward to it. There's a lot going on with CMMC as the deadlines approach, and people are some are a little more panic-stricken than others. So really looking forward to the conversation today and seeing if we can give folks a good head start on where they need to go. So when we talk about conducting self-assessments, there's really two reasons for doing it. One is that you're going to be required by the contract that you've either been awarded or are bidding on to be level 2 self-assessed or CMMC level 1 assessment. Those are the two primary reasons. The third reason is to prepare yourself for a certified assessment. You can't just jump in, schedule an assessment, have them show up, and expect it to go well. So we want to walk you through the actual self-assessment process, whether it's for your own purposes to satisfy the contractual requirements, or whether it's preparation for a certification assessment. So both are equally important, just depending on where you are in the process of things. So a couple other things we get out of conducting a self-assessment, though, is we're able to train the staff that's responsible for our CMMC compliance. And most organizations, you want to designate somebody as the manager for this, your compliance manager, your security officer, an executive, and put them in charge of this program to make sure that it's got accountability and it's got assigned responsibilities. So we want to make sure that the staff understands what's involved in the process, not only in the assessment itself, but also in just maintaining the program, because it's an ongoing type of thing. Executing the assessment really gives you an opportunity to influence the culture of the organization. The CMMC requirements are based on protecting CUI, or protecting sensitive data. And as you go through that process, it puts a security first mindset in the people involved in the assessment for sure, but then those flow down to the staff for all positions, as they have to participate in the policies you establish, the procedures you establish. So it really helps frame a new culture for the organization. Sometimes that can be the most difficult part, because people, as human beings, many of us are resistant to change. But getting those folks all on board and supporting the program makes it so much easier to actually execute and live through the process, as we'll call it. And then the goal of CMMC, as I said, is to really safeguard FCI, if it's a level 1, federal contract information, or CUI for level 2, controlled unclassified information. So as you go through this process, you're actually putting in place the increased protections needed to not only meet the certification requirements, but to also protect that data, be good stewards of that data and ensure that, you're putting yourself in a position to continue operating, not have a breach, and or at least maybe not a significant one, and be able to survive if one does occur, and without penalty or too many negative impacts to the organization. So we really want to work through that process. Doing the self-assessment early in the cycle of things is going to give you the best chance to complete it in a good status, satisfy all the requirements, reduce the cost to some degree because you're expanding it over time. So you're moving those expenses across a year to 2 years, as opposed to trying to compact it into 6 months. And then as we have more time to work on it, you can actually implement some of the solutions needed as you're working through the process, which reduces the overall impact on the organization When you complete an assessment, you've got 100 things out of 110 that you need to go back and implement. It's really difficult to, get your head around it and prioritize properly. If you can work through some of those items because you've got the luxury of time, then you can simplify that implementation process as you move forward. So those are the key reasons for conducting a self-assessment.
Jay, we do have a question that came in.
Sure.
Can a self-assessment be used for more than one contract, or does it have to be tailored to the contract?
So that's going to be determined by which systems you're using to provide the services for that contract. So part of the assessment process is to evaluate your system security plan. In CMMC speak, a system security plan is your security plan for the services, computers, systems, network, people that are involved in fulfilling that contract. So if a subsequent contract is using the same resources, then yes. If it's different resources, then a new self-assessment would be required.
Okay. Makes
Good one.
sense.
That's a good one. Yeah. Yeah. It's all bound to the contract. So, and again, for clarification on that, you would go to your prime, whoever's providing that to you, or to your DoD contracting officer and ask for clarification. But always seek their guidance wherever possible, because they'll put you on the straight and narrow, no questions, and they're there to help and support this effort as well. So, but that would be the general process behind that. Thank you. So when we talk about the assessment process itself, this is your self-assessment. Nobody else is doing it. You can get help. We provide assistance in conducting these, but it's your equipment, it's your environment. You're the one responsible for it. So part of that is identifying, well, what's in scope, as I just mentioned, for providing these services that we're going to offer to the DoD. What are the systems? What are the personnel? What equipment are in the data flow? What are the facilities? What communication methods are used in this avenue? And identifying those items in as much detail as possible. And then those are the only items that we need to evaluate against the requirements and objectives. In many small businesses, it's the entire environment. There's no network separation. Everybody wears multiple hats. It's just the nature of being a smaller business. We enjoy that. They're fast moving. We have a lot of responsibilities. Unfortunately, when it comes to CMMC requirements, it exposes us to the entire network that has to be addressed. Sometimes it's not a big deal. Sometimes it is. Depends on how things go as we work through the process. But being able to identify those systems, software, and everything else is going to be a key item. I've got some references at the end that we'll share, and one of them is how to determine the scope, and it gives really good detail on what to look for and how to classify it. So we'll go through those. So when we look at level 1 FCI protections, it's the most basic. It's actually called basic. That's where we need every contract is going to require that at a minimum, period. You're going to have the contract itself is FCI. Any add-on statements of work or delivery or purchase orders are going to be FCI. So you're always going to have some level of CMMC in your environment. And then level 2 being the controlled unclassified information. That is up to your prime or the Department of Defense to specify if the contract is going to have CUI. And it's up to them to classify the data and mark it as CUI. So if that is in your existing contracts, it won't be. It will be in new contracts beginning in October, that specification. Current contracts all say NIST 800-171 requirements. Level 2 is equivalent to the NIST 800-171. But anyway, moving on. And then level 3, which is beyond what we're going to get into in detail, but it is enhanced security for protecting CUI. It's equivalent to level 2 plus another 17 or 20 controls, I forget, from another document. But this self-assessment process would apply to anybody going through the level 3 process as well. So as I mentioned, we want to determine that scope. That'll be number 1. Identify the assets that we have to address. we want to follow the self-assessment guide, and we have self-assessment guides available. The DoD does, and I'm going to go into those in a little more detail because that's really, if you had a roadmap to follow, this is going to be the best one. In addition with some other reference materials, but this is what we're going to use. Also, familiarity with the FAR and DFARS requirements. They are encompassed in CMMC, but actually understanding the requirements, the requirement language, who's responsible, and so on is a valuable piece of information that your staff working on this process are going to want to know. And then also going through the self-assessment forces you to test any of the required plans and processes. So we're not just going to say we have them, we're going to execute them as part of that self-assessment. It is one of the requirements. Plans are tested. So we're looking at your incident response plan, your disaster recovery plan, your business continuity plan, your risk management plan, your vulnerability management plan. We're going to look at all those things, you're going to, and make sure that you've actually tested them. You're going to hold an exercise, document it, put the date, who's there, all those great things. And we'll talk about the evidence and such as we move forward in this. So this is the actual self-assessment process itself.
Yeah, there's a question that's kind of related, seems kind of related to that last part of testing. How should we validate that our implementation of controls is truly effective and not just documented? So would that be the testing part?
Yeah, well, it would be the testing part. So when we look at the self-assessment guide, we're going to get into this a little further along in the presentation. The self-assessment guide breaks out the evaluation of items as examine, interview, and test. And when we look at the tests, there's where the actual technical controls will be evaluated, which controls, and then we're going to evaluate them to see if they're achieving that objective that's listed above it. So I'll go through that a little bit. You really need to have a good technical understanding when you're evaluating these controls to ensure that they're actually achieving what they need to achieve.
That's all for now.
Okay, thanks. All right, so when we talk about the self-assessment guides, these are published, as I mentioned, by the Department of Defense. I've got a link in the references to take you to it. They're intended for use by the actual certified assessors, by the organizations seeking assessment, by other cybersecurity professionals, registered practitioners, certified cybersecurity or certified CMMC professionals, and so on, and the individuals and companies that support the CMMC efforts. As an organization seeking assessment, OSA, whoops, let me go back one. Sorry about that, guys. As an organization seeking an assessment, you are the individuals and companies that support the CMMC efforts. So these are specifically designed to guide the individuals that are working through the assessment process on what are the real requirements, how do we break those requirements down into the objectives, and then how do we measure if we're satisfying those objectives. So it's a really lengthy document for the level 2, but it's got all the detail and everything that you're going to need and additional references to educate you along the way. Very helpful document. When we talk about what is an assessment, it's the testing or evaluation of the security controls to determine the extent to which the controls are implemented correctly, operating as intended, and producing the desired outcome. And this is all going to be in comparison to the requirements and the objectives. So the self-assessment guide not only states what you have to do, it states how it's measured, and then it also provides some examples that are, some of them are rather simplistic, but examples of controls that were implemented to satisfy the objectives. So it's really, really helpful in that sense. Here's an example. This is from the self-assessment guide, level 1, right? So if you're level 1, you'll do this. If you're a level 2, you do all level 1 controls. So this would be applicable to level 2. And if you're doing level 3, same thing. Level 1, level 2 all apply, and then the level 3 add-ons. So when we look at this in the self-assessment guide, we get our requirement, access control level 1, 3.1.1. The 3.1.1 is a direct reference to the NIST 800-171 R2 control number 3.1.1. So these items come straight out of that NIST 800-171 R2. The requirement is to limit information system access to authorized users, processes acting on behalf of users or devices. The technical language used in these requirements can sometimes get confusing. Always just break it down, standard reading practices. It's technical information, break it down into small components, digest them, and move on. Beneath it are the objectives. These, in this case, 6 items. If you're satisfying all 6 of these items, these objectives, then you're satisfying the requirement. And that's the way you want to approach it from your self-assessment. Don't worry about the large requirement statements. We're going to focus on the objectives, and we're going to identify that we're satisfying or not satisfying each of these objectives. And that way we have a building block. If we do all these, then obviously we're doing the requirement. If we're doing 5 out of 6, we are not satisfying the requirement. Satisfying the requirement requires 100% objective satisfaction. So, just keep that in mind. Man, it looks good. We got 5 out of 6. We're all right. Nope, we're not. We have to have 6 out of 6 every time. And they all have varying number of objectives. Some have 1, some have 10. There's one that has, I think, 13. So they get detailed. So when we look at this, the explanation of these items, users are defined and so on. Then there's another document called the NIST Special Publication 800-171A, and it provides additional guidance around these objectives. So another helpful resource, gives you some other details, some other resources, like the 800-53 and so on, where you can go and look these requirements up in other frameworks to help you better understand them and how they might be applied in your environment. But the whole focus of the self-assessment, using the self-assessment guide, is to satisfy these objectives one by one. When we talk about satisfying the objectives, there's 3 things the assessor is going to look for. And these are, you're the assessor if it's a self-assessment, or you're preparing to have a certified assessor come in. So these are all followed by the same individuals, or these are all followed the same way by all individuals. So I just took a little subset of this. I know it's a lot of words crammed on the screen, but it's important to show it because these are all the things that can be looked at. I trimmed off probably the first 5 and the last 5, but this is what, as part of the assessment, what you want to look at. List of active system accounts and the name of the individual associated with each account. Notifications or records of recently transferred, separated, or terminated employees. List of conditions for group and role membership. So I'm going to stop there for a second. Under this examine heading in the self-assessment guide, it's telling you exactly what you need to have to demonstrate your compliance with this objective or these objectives. Don't disregard this. When the assessor comes in, if you're getting a certified assessment, they're going to ask to see maybe all of these items, or they're going to pick and choose, okay, you gave us a good copy of X, Y, and Z. Let me see your list of recently disabled system accounts. And when they look at that, they're going to want to see the forms that you submitted to have them disabled, the authorizations for it, and you'll get into all those as we go through the process. But look at this exam, and this is going to give you an indication of what we need to have for documentation. Very important. The other method they're going to use is what's called interview. They are actually going to request time with various individuals in the organization. And these may be individuals with responsibilities around implementing the program or managing it, or it may just be a staff member that's got to abide by it. And they're going to ask, some specific questions. If this were to happen, what would you do? Where would you look to know if it's acceptable for you to use a USB drive or not? Who would you tell if you discovered an incident, a cybersecurity incident? And they're going to, just ask these questions of people. The reason for that is primarily to ensure that the organization as a whole understands what their responsibilities are in satisfying these CMMC requirements. Every position within the company is going to have certain responsibilities, whether it's, conducting or participating in email phishing campaigns, participating in training, And then, protecting the actual data that they may control. So we want to make sure that those folks are well versed in all the policies, procedures that are applicable to them. And then lastly, the piece that we would do from the assessment standpoint is testing. And this is where we would actually possibly try to sign into an account with a bad password, just to make sure that, yep, it prompted us and the password failed. Or sign in to prove that MFA prompts are being provided. Maybe create an event that would trigger an alert in your security monitoring software. This is an actual, implementation of a practice that would demonstrate that you have the right controls in place, either allowing or preventing something as needed. They might ask you to open your web browser and browse to Facebook. Uh-oh, we're not blocking Facebook in our firewall. Oops, that's, those are the things we're going to look for. So when they test, they're actually going to, apply operation and make sure that it conforms to the requirements. So when we're doing the self-assessment, we do the same thing. We're following the exact same guide. We're doing the exact same things we expect a certified assessor to do. And that's key, because when you attest to your level 2 self-assessment or your level 1 self-assessment, you're attesting that you've done all these things, and you're signing off saying that you've done it. And they're going to hold you to that attestation. So we want to make sure we're doing it properly.
We have a question about, does the guide provide like a recommended or a way that the compliance evidence should be organized for easy auditor access later?
The guide does not do that, but I have a recommendation. So let's go back a couple of slides here. I'm just going to show you the numbering sequence. So when you're collecting evidence, the best way to keep it organized is to reference it by this number, 3.1.1, include the objective that we're addressing with that evidence. So it'd be 3.1.1.A-A, however you want to do it. And then a sequential identifier. If you've got, 3 pieces of evidence to show that you've got your authorized users identified. It could be a account access form that your managers create when they hire somebody. That might be part of it. It might be a report of all your Office 365 or Active Directory users. That could be another piece of evidence with it. Or it could be a report from, maybe you have an IT provider, an MSP or something, and they can provide you various reports as well. So that would be 3.1.1-A-1-2-3, something along those lines. Always make the evidence match these numbers. Otherwise, you spend more time going through the evidence a second, third, and fourth time to remember which requirement does this apply to. So it's easy. Sometimes we're going to use the same evidence for other objectives. You copy the file, you rename it to whatever the new requirement is, 3.2.1-B, and that way you have one piece of evidence for every objective. That's my recommendation for keeping track of that stuff. That's a good question, because you get lost in the hundreds of documents. Yeah, for sure. In the self-assessment guide for each requirement, we've looked at the objectives, we've looked at what the assessment methodology for examine, interview, and test is. And then there's another section for each of these requirements called discussion and further discussion. And in that area, it gives you some plain English description of really what they're trying to achieve, what the intent of the requirement is. And then they'll also give you a couple, as I mentioned, examples of how you can satisfy that. So in this particular case, I just put the example in here. Your company maintains a list of all personnel authorized to use company information systems. This list is used to support identification and authentication activities conducted by IT when authorizing access to systems. So this would be, like I was mentioning, an authorization form. It's a new hire. Here's what they're going to need access to. And the manager signs off saying these people are authorized to access this. That form gets submitted. Maybe it's HR that does it. You guys are going to have your own process. but then it goes, once it's authorized, it goes to somebody to implement. And this is key that you look at it this way, right? One entity is providing the authorization. Another entity, a separate, you're going to see that term frequently in CMMC, separate, segmented, isolated. A separate entity then implements that action based on the approval. And then you may have a third entity that evaluates to validate it was done correctly. That could be the original, authorizer. It can't be, you can't validate your own work. So it couldn't be the IT folks. It could be a third party involved or a third person involved in that process. But you always want to have the checks and balances, and that's going to be key for several of the requirements that specifically state separation of duties, responsibilities are segmented, things of that nature. So we want to make sure we've got that built in all the things we do. We're always looking for an authorization, an individual or a role that has the responsibility of authorizing that access. And then we're looking for the controlled implementation based on that authorization. Those two things are going to need to be in everything we do. And it becomes very simplistic once you start working through it. So this is really the meat of that self-assessment guide. I think before I go on, I want to pop it open real quick. And this is the actual self-assessment guide itself. I've got links to download it. This is the same control we were looking at. And there's some, preamble to all this. We're not going to go through all that. It describes, how to use it and so on. But we have our requirement. We have the actual requirement language. We have the objectives. Here's the assessment methodology, examine, interview, and test. I told you I cropped some of this out. It's all good. And here's the discussion. I wanted to show the discussion section. The further discussion breaks it down just a little bit more, tries to provide a little different light on it. And then the examples that are available to you. And one item at the end, this potential assessment considerations. I'm going to make that a little bigger. So we're looking at the objective. So in this case, A. Here you can see the reference, this example, they're referencing objectives A and D. That's what these little identifiers mean. There's ones for objectives D, E, and F. So, if we're doing these things and we can go and find this evidence and documentation, then depending on our other processes and everything else, all things being generic, I'll say, we can achieve satisfaction of these objectives if we're doing things similar to this. So the examples, these are not recommendations of what you should do. They're just an example of what could be done, right? So sometimes they're applicable to us, sometimes they're not. We can use them. Sometimes the assessment considerations, we can look at that and say, we've got that, here's where it is, and that's going to help us satisfy this objective. So it's really, really helpful in that sense, and trying to work through the process and say, well, what do we need? Because when you just read this, authorized users are identified. Yeah, I see them. They're right there. And no, that's not what we mean, and this gives us a good explanation of those items. So these self-assessment guides are going to be the key item you're going to use. All right, let's jump back over here. All right, some of the most common mistakes or pitfalls that you're going to come across, and you're going to do, trust me. That's why the sooner you can start this, the sooner you can work through all these problems. The biggest one is lack of documentation in everybody's assessment. It doesn't matter. It just is. All 110 requirements for level 2, 17 for level 1, have to be addressed in written policies, procedures, and plans. They have to be documented. When an assessor is looking at this, and even if you're level 1, you can be subject to an assessment if you suffer a breach. If you report a cybersecurity incident through the DFARS reporting, DibNet reporting site, you are subject to an assessment. Now, it'll be against your current level. They're not going to come in and assess you against level 2, but you will be evaluated. So you need to make sure that these things are documented. You're not embellishing your responses. There's no blatant, mistruths. If you state something that is wrong, that's a big no-no. It's not quite perjury, but they call it falsifying information, and they are treating it very seriously. So anyway, go back to this documentation. It's got to be in a policy. It's got to be in a procedure or addressed in the procedure somehow, very clearly. You don't want to have to search for it to, determine a meaning and say, that's what it means. Make it as clear and plain as possible. Plans, they're in the CMMC requirements. There's a few things around what the plan must include, and we just want to double check and verify that those statements are in the plan. So when we talk about that documentation, it's putting the language in your written documentation that aligns with these requirements and clearly demonstrates your intent to satisfy that requirement. That's what we need to do. And this is the biggest area that people fall short in. Jennifer asked the question about evidence, right? And making sure we have the right evidence. Well, part of that, by numbering that sequence that way, you can actually look through your folder with all your evidence files and verify that you've got a piece of evidence for every one of those objectives. So you definitely need to have that. What we'll see a lot of times is either incorrect evidence, because you get mixed up. I'll be honest with you, you're looking at a lot of different stuff. You got the previous one on your mind, you're getting a screenshot or something else, you attach the wrong one. Those are minor and pretty easily corrected, but missing evidence is a little harder to deal with. So, looking at it from labeling the evidence files per objective, you'll be able to quickly identify if you're missing anything and get it corrected. Having that evidence is going to be key. And it's key for the system security plan, which we'll touch base on here towards the end. And then an insufficient control. So it only meets part of the objective. Maybe we had a list of authorized users, but we didn't have a way to prove that they were being authorized by one and implemented by another. We just had the list of users that were authorized, and then we had the list of Active Directory users that we matched up and said, yep, they're there. It doesn't meet all the objectives. It met some of them, but then that leaves us short of satisfying the requirement. And being able to interpret each of those objectives independently and identify, yes, we're doing this, or no, we're not. That's where we want to make sure we're getting to that. So we'll see some insufficient controls as we go through the process. And you will see it. You're going to find them. I mean, they're there. You're doing it. We just don't have it properly documented. That's an administrative control. Or maybe we just have a policy that states don't do this, and we don't have any way to either audit it or control it on the systems itself. Those are the types of insufficiencies I'm talking about, where we're partly doing it, but just not quite all the way.
Yeah, those are good examples. Somebody asked about other examples of technical or procedural gaps that are frequently overlooked. So this is some that you listed here. Are there any other things that come to mind?
On the technical gaps, I mean, it's going to vary on the systems that we're applying these controls to and the requirements we're trying to satisfy with them. But probably the biggest area we see for the technical controls issues is just maybe a lack of technical knowledge and understanding how that control really works or how it should really be implemented. So the technical controls truly are very technical and really need somebody with good technical acumen to implement and understand. Implemented incorrectly, they can put you at greater risk. They can break things. They can prevent access to things. So they need to be done properly. And then also when they're done in the context of CMMC, there's certain things that need to be done to satisfy those requirements. In Active Directory, there's lots of group policy controls that are just, generic, general standard type of things that are good practices. But when it comes to CMMC, there's specific implementations of some of those best practices that have to be done. So that technical knowledge really comes into play. On the procedure side, it's really going to be the operators within the organization the ones that actually are doing the implementation, making sure that they're involved in creating the procedure documentation, because otherwise it may be inaccurate. And if you're looking at it, you're going through a procedure saying, okay, now you tell me how you do it, and they tell you something completely different than what's documented, that's a problem.
Yeah.
So always, always using the
Makes sense.
people. Yeah, exactly. So those are probably two of the biggest gaps we see around those areas. Okay.
All good.
All right. So let's talk about how to complete a self-assessment successfully and what successful actually looks like. So I mentioned time several times,
Mhm.
during this discussion. The more lead time you can give yourself to conducting this, improving it, and satisfying those requirements, the better off you're going to be. As I mentioned, you can spread the cost out further. You can spread the labor effort, because there is a significant labor effort tied to this. You can spread that out over more time. It just makes it less impactful for your organization. So when we're looking at, conducting your first self-assessment, this is the first one I'm referring to. A level 1 assessment, it can take you up to 3 months. I know it's 17 items. It's like, how hard can that be? But you want to work at a pace that doesn't impact your other duties. You just don't want to be frazzled. You want to be able to give it the attention it needs. That's an appropriate amount of time to conduct your first self-assessment. For a level 2 self-assessment, there's a lot more to understand. You have a lot more to learn. It takes a lot longer to accomplish. 6 to 12 months, 6 months at the minimum, 12 months at the maximum is really, where you should be looking at to conduct a self-assessment for level 2. Now,
Hey, Jay,
yeah,
I have my own question. Do people have time with the upcoming, implementation and deadlines?
yep, good
Do we have
question.
time to spread it out over 12 months at this
It
point?
depends is the answer I'll give you. So here's where these are going to come into play with the new requirements going into contracts and going into bids beginning in October. So to actually bid on a contract that requires level 1, you must have your score uploaded to SPURS, your
Mhm.
system security plan. There is no POAM for a level 1. You have to meet all requirements. That has to be in the system currently. Your score cannot be more than 3 years old, and then you'll be good to go. So, or not, sorry, not your score. There isn't a score for level 1. You're either doing it or you're not. But your self-assessment has to be completed, and you have to have that indicated in SPURS. So for
Okay.
level 1 self-assessments, yeah, there's time. And even within that 3-month window, we're close. I mean, it's going to be
Mhm.
borderline. But with the proper help, you could do it. You could accelerate that to some degree. The CMMC level 2 self-assessment. Now you're going to be gambling if we look at that 6 to 12 months, right? So, although they're not intending to put CMMC level 2 requirements in bids and contracts beginning this October, level 2 requirements should be applied beginning next October in 2026.
Okay.
But they specifically state, the DoD does, that they reserve the right to do it at any time. So it's
Yeah.
very possible that in November of 2025, a RFP is released and it specifies CMMC level 2 self-assessment required. I can't, we don't know what they're going to do. Their intention is that they'll be doing it in October of 26 for level 2.
Okay.
And they might do some of the self-assessments as part of this initial release. So there's going to be 2 level 2 requirements. There's going to be CMMC level 2 self-assessed, and there's going to be CMMC level 2 certified.
Mm.
So it's very likely that they'll incorporate the self-assessed earlier because they can.
Mhm.
And the certified one requires a lot of lead time and everything else. So that one I would expect to see probably not roll out until October 2026. So here's the kicker on those proposals. You already have to have this done to be able to submit a proposal for a
Mhm.
bid. And that's where the timetable comes a big crunch. So that's a good question, Jennifer.
Okay.
And it's all going to be a matter of, what's the business goals? What do we need to do here? All right, having dedicated staff to focus on managing the compliance efforts. It's especially if you're going to compress the time frame, you can't take your VP of operations and say, okay, you're going to run with this. You need somebody that can put the time in without detracting from your other responsibilities. So, depending on the organization, the size of it, the complexity of it, you may need a person just for this. You may need to split the responsibilities or duties of somebody so that they can focus on this. You're going to have to adapt, but it really needs focused attention. It's a project and it's a large project, and we need somebody to manage it, prioritize, hold people accountable. There's a lot of delegation that happens in this, and somebody's got to oversee it and make sure it happens. The other piece you can do is work with knowledgeable CMMC professionals, and I'll talk about what those roles are in a minute. But there's several validated roles that you can work with that are trained and recognized by the CMMC Advisory Board, which is the group that is responsible for these assessments. They conduct the assessments, they certify the assessors, they register the other professionals. And so it's a whole organization built around CMMC. It's a private nonprofit organization, but they implement the assessments based on the DoD requirements. And then there's also a ton of resource and reference material available around CMMC. I'm going to list some good starting points for that in a follow-up slide here. And maybe, Jennifer, is there any way you could copy those and put them in the chat maybe before we end the recording?
Yes, I can do that.
Or in the Q&A or something? All right, so when we talk about actually conducting your self-assessment, we've gone over, the self-assessment guide, establishing the scope, working through the process and understanding how to use that self-assessment guide to achieve the best results. We've talked about some of the pitfalls, what success looks like, how to achieve it, but how do we actually conduct the assessment in a most efficient and streamlined manner? So when we look at the control families, and I'm going to switch back over real quick to the assessment guide. So AC being access control, that's a control family, right? We've got an audit control family. We've got a training control family. That's what I mean by looking at those. So all the 3.1, that's all access control. 3.2 is going to all be around, I believe 3.2 is training off the top of my head. Oh, the system communications. No, it's 3.13. I thought I was right, already in order. 3.2 is awareness and training. 3.3, auditing and audit and accountability. You want to tackle them by the subject group. That's going to be the easiest way to do it. You don't necessarily have to do them in order as they're listed here, but you want to handle that whole group at a time. So we're going to handle audit and accountability. We're going to go through those assessment objectives one by one. Then maybe we'll jump up to awareness and training because we know we've got a good training program. We feel pretty buttoned up. Let's get some wins under us. Let's do this one. Access control is probably one of the most difficult ones. I prefer to start with it, get the hardest out of the way first. So 3.1. So that's what I mean, working on it by control family. You're working in the same logical information set. It's just easier to keep focus. And the objectives, as you go through it, you'll see that how they all relate, within that control family. So many of them cross over and relate. And as your mindset is on that family, it's much easier to do them all. Identify the documentation by name. So as we're looking at each of these objectives and each of these requirements, I want you to record the name of the policy or the file name, whatever you need to do, the documented procedure, the plan that it's in. Some people might go so far as to list who's responsible for that. It should be in that document, but if it's not, but if you identify the related documents that demonstrate you've incorporated this into your security plan, your policies, plans, and procedures, then we don't have to go looking for it later. We can just reference that as we're evaluating each of these control items. And what we typically find when we're doing this is that the documentation didn't explicitly state the information needed to satisfy the requirement. Don't make changes on the fly. You have that documentation is all approved, authorized, whatever the case might be. It's got an effective date. You can make changes, but then label it as a draft. And as you're updating it and working through the process, you can then get those drafts approved when you've completed everything, re-update your policies, reissue everything, set new effective dates, and you're good to go. But don't modify the current live authorized documents. Describe what you think you need to provide for evidence. So this is a nice approach because we're not stopping what we're doing and going looking for screenshots or reports. We get to stay in our mindset and we just get to jot down, I want a report of current users. I want evidence of when the last user was disabled and for what reason. I want the form for employee termination, whatever the case might be. Jot down the things you want to see for evidence. Make it, shorthand, whatever you need to make it, something you can come back to and say, okay, Bob, I need you to go collect these evidence files because we're going to delegate the heck out of that, and we want other people to help us do it. Mm-hmm. As I just said, assign the evidence collection to the appropriate personnel. A lot of data has to be collected. Some of it's going to be through vendors. You're going to need a vendor to say, hey, give me a report on my firewall rules. I need to know what's blocked, what's not blocked, and so on. So there's lots of different people. We need that managed. Be honest. Don't embellish your responses. Don't try to put more into them than you're really doing. This is a way for you to improve your security posture. It's a way for you to demonstrate you're meeting the intent of the CMMC program and meeting the requirements of protecting CUI. Don't fake it. Just be honest. And if you're short in an area, then we've got room to improve, and we're going to make it better. That's the whole goal of this. It's not a pass or fail test. It's an ongoing program that's going to be in existence in your organization for as long as you're doing defense contracting. So let's make it something we can live by, that we can execute properly, and actually in the end be proud that, hey, we've got a good program here that we can manage, that we can secure this information, and we can be trusted to hold the nation's secrets. That's what it's about. And then we're going to create our self-assessment score at the end. This is level 2 only. There's a scoring mechanism where you are basically, you start out at 110 points and you deduct points for the items that you don't have satisfied. And you can end up with a negative 250 something, I believe. You can get in a hole real quick. That's all I'll say. It is anticipated that a self-assessment score of about an 86 or higher, 89 or higher, I believe, is going to be widely accepted, but the expectation is that you'll achieve the full 110 within 6 months of completing that self-assessment. So that's what we're going to look at. Okay, one of the biggest items about that self-assessment, this is your plan of action and milestone, your POAM. So when we identify requirements or objectives that are not satisfied by our self-assessment, those items have to be put into what's called a plan of action and milestones. And that is our plan to actually, what are we going to do to satisfy this objective? Who's going to be responsible for it? What might be the anticipated completion date? Is there associated budget tied to this? Are there vendors involved in this? In planning out those items and getting those completed, because as I said, you're going to only have 6 months to get those done. So we want to be prepared going into it, that we know how we're going to manage those items as soon as they're identified so that we can get to work on them as quickly as possible. On the self-assessment side of things, we might have a little bit more time, depending on where we are score-wise, to get them all completed, but we're going to be shooting to get up to a minimum of the 89 points no matter what we're doing. So if we're well below that, We're going to focus on the POAM items we need to get us above that 89 mark. And we're going to prioritize these POAM items based on the risk to the environment, to CUI or FCI, and the potential impact should that be exploited. You know, what do they get? What's a threat actor gain if they get access to this? So we want to look at those two things and then let that drive the priority. I will tell you that training is one of the easiest things to accomplish. Gets you, removes a deduction of, I believe, 9 points, and can be done just like that. And it's the most impactful to your staff as well. They actually begin to understand the cybersecurity concerns. So this POAM is going to be a key item. It's one of the outputs of our self-assessment. And this is what we're going to do to manage the completion of satisfying all requirements. As you go through your first self-assessment, you're going to find a lot of items that you're not satisfying. Your POAM is going to be lengthy. I'm not going to, sugarcoat it. But you want to focus on that and get yourselves to that at least 89 to 90 points if you can, as quickly as possible without breaking the bank, without stopping production, all those things, right? You got a business to run, but we need to achieve these things. And then once we have those in place, then achieving full compliance is the goal. And then we go through this process every year. As a self-assessment, you are required to do a self-assessment each year. So level 1, level 2 self-assessment, every year you have to do this again. And what we look for in the following years is how do we improve upon what we've done? We don't do the same, we don't look at things the same way. We've been using this for a year. We've been operating under our security plan for a year. We've already identified shortcomings. I'm certain of it. What do we do to improve our CMMC program, make operations smoother, make security better, make auditing easier, whatever the case may be? In most cases, where I see the biggest improvements is going to be in documentation. On the first pass through this, you did what you needed to do to get by. I'll be honest with you. There's such a volume of work that's how you're treating it. But the second go around, you're looking at things and say, well, does that really make sense? Let's put a little more detail to that. Let's give it some more structure. Let's give it a logical reference that people can follow. How does this roll into training? Let's make sure that our training is addressing these policy changes. And you just look at things in a slightly different way. And each subsequent one, you're looking at A, are there any CMMC changes that we need to evaluate and incorporate? And then B, has our system changed? Are there any changes in our infrastructure or our systems that we have to reevaluate entirely? Or are we looking at, hey, this is an opportunity for improvement and let's really focus on that? But you will have to do these self-assessments each and every year.
There's a question back for the scoring and, the points deducted. Is there a document that shows how many points each section has? Because in terms of prioritizing, you kind of mentioned, training's an easy one to get 9, to not lose the 9 points. In terms of what you should go after fixing first, would it make sense to go after the ones that impact that score the most? And is that available? Like what the scoring reduction
it is available. You can look it up. I'm trying to see. I know I have it. I was going to pop it open real quick, but it's in a million different places on my system. But yeah, look up CMMC SPURS scoring or self-assessment scoring, and you'll find a document. There's no easy Excel file, at least there hadn't been. There's a PDF that breaks out each of the requirements, and so each of these items, each of these requirements has its own value of 1, 3, or 5, or deduction, I should say, of
deduction.
1, 3, or 5, and those will add up. You can look at it from the standpoint of, hey, I'm going to outsource this and I can quickly achieve 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'll say 30 points because I think there's a 5-pointer in here. I can quickly achieve 30 points if I get this outsourced and can provide this evidence. I need a good policy around it. I can do that. The procedures are going to be the vendor responsibility. I don't need to worry about that. And I just need evidence from that vendor to show that we're satisfying it. So outsourcing these items can be very, very helpful, can help you achieve it quicker, comes with a dollar amount, right? But a lot of times that dollar amount is less than you doing it yourself. There's a lot of investment in the tools and the applications needed to conduct these things. This is just an example, but it applies to any of these areas.
Yeah, there's another question about, words of wisdom when things require both budget and executive buy-in to resolve. And I think that you kind of mentioned one is it might cost less to outsource some of it to get there more quickly. But I don't know if you had any more. That's kind of
yeah. Well, it depends on who's managing your compliance program. So if it's a executive position within the organization, they may have the authority themselves to prioritize, to allocate funds. If it's not, then they're going to need to seek that from the executive leadership, right? So no matter who, I should say, is managing your compliance effort, managing the self-assessment, we've got to have executive engagement. 2 reasons. One, when this is done, an executive in the organization is going to sign this attestation. They're putting their name, they personally will be held accountable. The organization is not held accountable. That person's name is personally held accountable for stating that we are following these requirements, we are adhering to these requirements. The organization obviously is responsible for implementing it and conducting those activities, and would suffer penalties should they, not be doing what they're supposed to be doing. But the person signing that attestation can be held personally liable by the Department of Defense. So we want to make sure that they're engaged, they understand what they're doing. Yeah.
That's pretty motivating for buy-in.
Yeah, exactly. But secondly, we need them to authorize these activities. We need them to understand what's the urgency or not urgent matters, how to help get these prioritized, how to get the funds allocated, how to free up personnel resources to help us do these things. So how do you prioritize some of those actions and get them done is going to be different for each and every organization, but it starts by having that executive engagement. They've got to be part of this process. And then also when we're talking about the POAM and getting it done, I mentioned outsourcing. You already have various vendors in your organization doing different services for you. Make sure you engage them in this process where it's applicable. They need to know where you stand from what the policy requires. They need to adhere to that policy. And then you can also tell that vendor, well, you need to have documented procedures for this that are going to be available for our assessor should we need it. I need you to provide this evidence, this often, that kind of thing. I talked about managing the POAM as a project. It's a subset, I guess, of the whole compliance effort, but it is a project and we need to, get this thing executed. And then when you have specific questions around, does this apply to us? Broader type questions, and some of them could even be specifics, I suppose, depending on the circumstance. But go back to your prime contractor, the one that's, demanding some of these things, or your contracting officer within the DoD. What I see a lot of times is a prime is going to send you a thing saying, hey, I need you to fill in this questionnaire for NIST 800-172. And you're like, well, why? We don't have any CUI. And they're going to come back and say, oh, we're asking all our vendors to do it, or all our contractors. And you can go back and say, well, we don't have CUI. Are you telling us you're going to give us CUI? And make them justify it. But then if you just have general questions around how does this apply to us, or in a communication path from you to us, how are you going to send us that information? They're going to be helpful in it because they want all their contractors to be valid and to be certified or self-assessed properly. So they'll be a partner for you. They're going to work with you. They're not going to drop a hammer on you. They really want to help get you to where you need to be.
Yeah,
So
but they might ask you to do too much, which would impact your budget. So knowing all this stuff can help your budget.
Yeah, they could potentially, say, well, you need to do this. And then if you don't know what they're talking about, you can't defend it. You end up going down a rabbit hole when you really don't need to.
Yeah.
So engaging the right professionals will go a long way. Let's talk about that. So CMMC Advisory Board is your go-to place when you're looking for professionals to help you with CMMC. These are people that have demonstrated knowledge and experience through testing, through training programs provided by the CMMC Advisory Board, all intended to satisfy assessment requirements. So you have what's called an RPO. If you go look them up on the CMMC Marketplace, it is an organization that really, basically, bottom line is it's an organization that employs registered practitioners and registered practitioners advanced. So it's just a company that employs the people that help you guys get to where you want to go. I am a registered practitioner. AME Group is not currently a registered practitioner organization. They don't need to be. It's just a designation that an organization can have. We have various other certifications. We have our SOC 2 audits that we go through on a regular basis. We do another program as an MSP through an MSP certifying body for our controls around our MSP services. So they're different needs. We do, obviously our systems and services meet CMMC requirements as well, but we're not an RPO. Registered practitioners, our goal and function in the CMMC ecosystem is to help organizations achieve their compliance with level 1, level 2, or even level 3 in that matter, by being able to actually implement changes, recommend changes, explain what these requirements really mean, help you define how you're going to go about satisfying them, and put all the pieces in place. So there's a lot that you can do as a registered practitioner that you can't do as an assessor. And our role as an MSP, the registered practitioner role, really aligns with our business mission and what we do for our customers. So that's why we're registered practitioners. We work with dozens of defense contractors in the CMMC realm. We also work with dozens of financial institutions, healthcare institutions, all for the same aspect of meeting their compliance requirements. An assessment is an assessment. You understand the goals and objectives of the assessment, the technical systems and controls needed to achieve it, and you can work in pretty much any industry. And that's what we do. So once we go through this self-assessment process and you're working with a professional that gets it and knows what's required of it, then you can prepare yourself for the certified assessment. When we're looking at a certified assessment, there's two things here that you're going to be looking for. One is you will go through a C3PAO, which is the organization that employs or engages the professionals that will do the assessment. That's the only way to do it, through the C3PAO. Again, you get to these through the CMMC AB Marketplace. There's a link in the references. You can choose it by industry, by location. There's lots of options for filtering and looking around. I don't have any specific recommendations for you. Wish I could, but I don't. We have worked with the DIBCAC directly and two assessments and are very familiar with this process and what they're going to do, but we're not working with any C3PAOs at this time. The C3PAO organization will bring in their management, their assessment, leadership to oversee the process, their quality assurance, their certification, governance aspects. There's a whole process that they bring to the table. And then they'll assign the proper CCP or CCA to conduct, or multiples, to conduct the assessment and go through the process of getting you certified. They're also going to be the ones responsible for posting your certification to the SPURS system. So once you go through a certified assessment, you no longer control what happens with that certification. It's done outside of your hands, but you are informed of it. So take a look at the CMMC AB marketplace if you're looking for folks in your region or for a specific skill set or anything else, or pick up the phone, call the AME group. We're standing by ready to help you guys no matter where you're located or what you're doing. Here's a list of references. Not real attractive, but this top one, it's at the top for a reason. This is a really good source for a lot of other references. Helps get you in the right area there and can find a lot of different things for you. Just going to pop this over here real quick and show you. So you've got everything you want here. Here's our self-assessment guides. Here's our scoping guidance, level 1, 2, and 3. There's some other stuff that you're not going to need, but it's here. There's some SPURS information, very helpful. The assessment process, interesting document. It is the technical details of how the certified assessors approach the whole assessment. So as I was just talking about with the C3PAO, this is the guidance that they have to follow. It's kind of neat if you have time to be familiar with it. If you're going through a certified assessment, it's definitely helpful. Safeguarding the DoD 171. That's good. We're not worried about the enhanced. Here's some more stuff about SPURS. And there's some good training on the reference sheet here. SPURS level 2, right here. The Supplier Performance Risk System Training and References. If you go to this link and kind of scroll down the page, there's helpful videos on how to actually input your score, how to input your level 2 self-assessment. Very helpful guidance on using the SPURS system. How to get access to it because it uses a different authenticator. It's a real pain in the butt. But anyway, it's there. And then CISA has some good resources and tools available as well. These are typically free. They require your knowledge and skills to operate many of them. But if you've got the resources to do it, then take advantage of it. There's certainly a ton of good information there, even if you don't use any of their tools. So these are just some key ones. This top one, though, will lead you to just about all these others. So I would make a note of that one for sure. And I believe with that, are there any more questions, Jennifer?
No more questions coming in other than very helpful.
Good. Well, I hope so. I hope there's work we can do with you to help you get to where you need to get. Always available to help answer questions, and then we can take things from there as needed. But the time frame is, the sand is quickly running through the hourglass. We are in the last mile of this effort. It's been ongoing for years. None of this should be a surprise to anybody. We knew it was coming. We've just been delaying the inevitable, it seems, but no longer. So whatever we can do to help you guys get to where you need to be in a financially responsible and responsible manner, we're here for it. So please reach out.
Thank you so much, Jay.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.